I am here to give you an overview regarding the subject daily rent control and slum clearance. But before giving overview regarding the subject, I would like to tell you regarding the relevance of this particular subject. Now, this subject is very important if you are intending to appear in competitive exams, particularly Delhi Judicial Services or other judicial services. Because in judicial services, generally a question is asked from a particular area, like eviction, the grounds of eviction of the tenant. Generally, you get a question from this particular area in competitive exams. Or if you are intending to join the field of litigation, then also this is very important subject for you because a major chunk of civil litigation is based upon landlord and tenant disputes and their relationship, the title or the disputes regarding title. So this subject is going to help you both ways, whether you are intending to join the profession or you are intending to appear in competitive exams. In addition to that, this subject will also help you in your day-to-day life because many of you have taken premises on rent or many of you may have given your premises on rent. So you are in a capacity of landlord or in a capacity of tenant. So in that capacity, you should know that what are the rights which have been given to the landlords and what are the rights which have been given to the tenants under Delhi Rent Control Act, and how the tenant is protected under the provisions of Delhi Rent Control Act, because Delhi Rent Control Act is more tilted in favor of tenant. So this subject, overall this subject is very important from examination point of view, like eviction, that problem-based questions which you get. I'll deal with that in later discussion. But yes, from competition point of view, from litigation point of view, and also from your day-to-day life point of view. Before giving an overview of the subject, I would like to tell you something about this particular subject, that why at all there was a need to have rent control laws. Because obviously we were having a general law. Transfer of Property Act was there. So why there was a need to have this additional law when a general law was there? The reason was that there was acute shortage of housing accommodation, and due to that acute shortage of housing accommodation, the tenants, they were exploiting their position. So what they were doing, they were just throwing away the tenants who were paying nominal rent or less rent, and again they were letting out their premises on higher rent. So this was a very prevalent practice, particularly during the time of after Second World War, because at that particular point of time there was acute shortage of housing accommodation. So just to overcome that difficulty and for the purpose of protecting the tenant from this practice which was being followed by the landlords, rent control laws, they were enacted in different states. We don't have any uniform rent control law. We have different rent control laws which have been enacted at the state levels. So we have Delhi Rent Control Act, we have UP Rent Control Act, MP Rent Control Act, Bombay Rent Control Act. So various rent control act we have, but more or less the provisions are similar to each other, and the object behind all these rent control laws are to protect the interest of the tenant. So this Delhi Rent Control Act, it was also enacted primarily with two objectives. The main purpose behind Delhi Rent Control enactment was, number one, to protect the tenant from eviction, and number two, to protect the tenant from payment of higher rent. So with this intention, this act was enacted. So obviously the provisions of this act, it is more tilted in favor of the tenant rather in favor of landlord. Because tenant was considered as weaker section of the society, and considering the tenant as weaker section of the society, special protection has been given to the tenant. So all these things we will be discussing under this particular paper. This paper, the syllabus is not very lengthy. Your entire syllabus is divided into 4 modules. In first part or module 1, you are going to study the basic terms which already you have discussed, which already you know, because you have discussed them under Transfer of Property Act. The general terms like lease, what is license, what is tenancy by holding over, why there is a need to serve a notice, and under what are the circumstances in which notice can be served by the landlord for the purpose of terminating tenancy. So this first topic, this entire first part, we have all general topics, but these general topics we will discuss in altogether a different context, because Transfer of Property Act, you have studied in your last semester, in your first year rather. So those terms we are not going to discuss in detail. What we are going to discuss here in this particular part, that is why these terms are relevant for our purpose under Delhi Rent Control Act. Lease and license, the definition of lease and license but why this difference is relevant under Delhi Rent Control Act? Why under Delhi Rent Control Act we are discussing the difference between lease and license? So this is the main thing which you need to understand under this particular subject, because if an agreement between the landlord and tenant is lease, then the tenant will get the protection of Delhi Rent Control Act. But if it is license, the tenant will not get any protection of Delhi Rent Control Act. So that is why this difference is relevant for our purpose. Similarly, tenancy by holding over notice. Again, what is the relevance of these terms in view of Delhi Rent Control Act? And under this particular subject, we will study 3 or 4 legislations. Like we will discuss Delhi Rent Control Act, Transfer of Property Act, Slum Clearance Act, and this Indian Easement Act. These are the 4 legislations which will be discussed in detail, and particularly in first part, all these except Slum Clearance Act, all the 3 laws will be discussed here in your part 1 in first topic itself. Then second part or second module, it deals with definitions, various definitions under the Act, various terms which have been used here, like landlord, who is a landlord, tenant, who is a tenant, because normally when we use this term landlord, we feel or we believe that landlord is a person who is owner of a particular property. But that is not true with respect to Delhi Rent Control Act. Under Delhi Rent Control Act, a person who is authorized to collect the rent will also be treated as landlord. So various definitions, who all persons will be treated as landlord under Delhi Rent Control Act, who will be treated as tenant, and also if the tenant dies, then what is the status of his legal heirs, whether the legal heirs of the tenant, whether they are entitled to inherit the interest in the property, or they are not entitled to inherit any right. So all these things we are going to discuss here under part 2. And at the same time, also we will discuss a difference between contractual tenancy and statutory tenancy. Contractual tenancy, where the contract is being entered between the landlord and the tenant under the general law. Statutory tenancy, where the tenant is protected under the provisions of the statute, like under the provisions of Delhi Rent Control Act, where in spite of his contractual tenancy being terminated, he will continue as a tenant and he will continue to enjoy all the rights which he was enjoying, which he was getting earlier in the capacity of contractual tenant. So the difference between the 2 terms we will discuss in detail with the help of cases which have been given in your case material. Then in the very same part, a very important topic is there, and that is regarding fixation of rent. Under Delhi Rent Control Act, the power is being given to the rent controller to fix the rent. And this power is being exercised by the controller on the basis of various circumstances, amenities which are attached to that premises, and after taking help of a valuer. But the problem with Delhi Rent Control Act is that once the rent has been fixed by the rent controller, after that, there is no scope of increase of that particular rent. The nominal increase concept is there. Section 6A of Delhi Rent Control Act provides that after a period of 3 years, 10% rent can be increased. Now you can understand this very well, that 10% increase means nothing. It's a kind of eyewash which has been provided here in the Act, because if today tenant is paying 100 rupees per month, after a period of 3 years, he will pay 110 rupees. So what increase the landlord is getting? It is only 10 rupees per month, which is not at all equal to the market price or other things which are related to the market value and other amenities which are attached to that particular property. So that is why the provisions of Delhi Rent Control Act, some of the provisions, because legislature is not coming forward to change the provisions. Look, all of you have studied constitutional law. You know that if a law is arbitrary, it is hit by Article 14 of the Constitution. And a law there may be a situation where a law is very much reasonable at the time when it was enacted. But later on, because the law has not changed in the changed circumstances, it has become arbitrary. So this is what exactly happened with these rent control laws, and particularly Delhi Rent Control Act. It was very reasonable law with a very reasonable object when it was enacted. But because it has not changed in the changed circumstances, and now after more than 50 or 50, 60 years, keeping the rent freeze to 50, 60 years back is not justified. It's arbitrary. And because the law has not been changed, so court has come forward, the judiciary has come forward, and some of the provisions of Delhi Rent Control Act, they have been stood down by the court, saying that it's unconstitutional. They are violating the fundamental rights which have been given to the people of this country. So all these things we will discuss under this particular part with the help of cases which have been given in your case material. Then next part, part 3. Part 3 is very, very important part of your syllabus from examination point of view, from competitions point of view, and from litigation point of view. Because most of the problems, they are related to eviction grounds. This particular part deal with the eviction grounds. Delhi Rent Control Act says that unless or until the landlord is able to bring his case under Section 14 of Rent Control Act, he is not even entitled to file eviction petition. So various grounds are given under Section 14, like non-payment of rent is there, subletting is there, misuse of premises by tenant is there, bona fide requirement is there. So various grounds are there, but again, the onus is on the landlord. It is for the landlord to bring his case under a particular ground and also to prove that particular ground. If he is saying that non-payment of rent is there, if he is saying the tenant has not paid rent for a past 3 or 4 months or 6 months, the burden is on him to prove that the tenant is in default of rent. If he is saying that premises has been subletting, the subletting is being created without his consent, the burden is on him to prove. So that is why I initially told you that the provisions of Delhi Rent Control Act, they are more in favor of tenant. They are more tilted in favor of tenant. Bona fide requirement. Now, bona fide requirement, initially it was a ground which was restricted to the landlord of residential premises only. But then again, when the legislature has not changed this particular ground, because it's arbitrary to restrict this ground only to the landlord of residential premises, then judiciary came forward, and in Satyavati Sharma, it was held very clearly by the court that this ground is open to the landlord of residential premises also. Because it is unjustified. You cannot say that only a landlord of residential premises can have a bona fide requirement and the landlord of commercial premises will not have any bona fide requirement. For example, if a businessman dies, leaving behind his widow and 2 children. Now, widow, she is not capable to continue that business. Children, they are too young to continue that business. So, for the time being, that premises has been given on rent. Now, after 20 years, when the children, they are grown up, now if that lady, that widow, now if she wants to get back the premises, if she wants to get back the vacant possession of the premises, can that be denied by saying that, look, you are the landlord of commercial premises, so you are not entitled to claim bona fide requirement ground because your requirement is not covered under these grounds. It's just arbitrary discrimination which has been created between a landlord of residential premises and a landlord of commercial premises. So it was held in Satyavati Sharma very clearly by the court that there is no justification. This discrimination is arbitrary. And it was held by the court that even a landlord of commercial premises is entitled to file eviction petition on the ground of bona fide requirement. And after this particular case, the courts, they were flooded with the litigation by the landlords of commercial premises. Because normally what happened, the legislature is not amending the law. The legislature is not changing the laws because a lot of pressure is being created on the legislature by the traders lobby of Delhi. By the traders lobby of Delhi, why the traders lobby of Delhi has created that kind of pressure on the legislature? Because it is the traders lobby of Delhi which are getting benefit of these kind of provisions which are tilted in favor of the tenant. It is the business persons or the tenants who are occupying places in top commercial places in Delhi, like in Chandni Chowk, in Lajpat Nagar, in Connaught Place, all places like top commercial places in Delhi. They have taken premises on rent. And by using that premises, they are earning crores and crores of rupees. And in return, what the landlord is getting? The landlord is getting that old rent, which was fixed just 50 years back or 40 years back or 30 years back, like 500 rupees per month, 1000 rupees per month, or 2000 rupees per month. It's very nominal rent the landlord is getting because of the protection which has been given to the tenant under the provisions of Delhi Rent Control Act. So that is why judiciary, in some cases, the judiciary on its own has declared some provisions of Delhi Rent Control Act as unconstitutional, and those provisions have been struck down by the court. In the very same part, another very important topic is Section 21, that is limited period tenancy. That you can say is a kind of exception to Section 14, because Section 14 says that landlord is bound to bring his case under the grounds which have been given under Section 14. Only after that he can file eviction petition. But limited period tenancy says that if you are having a premises which is lying vacant, you do not require that premises for a particular period, then you can create a limited period tenancy for that particular period. And once that period comes to an end, after that, you are not supposed to bring your case under the grounds given in Delhi Rent Control Act. You can, if the tenant is not vacating the premises, you can file an application straight away to the rent controller, and in return, the direction will be given to the tenant to vacate the premises. So this provision is an exception to the general law which has been given in Section 14, and this has been inserted intentionally by the legislature for the purpose of giving a kind of incentive to the landlords who are not using their premises, whose premises is lying vacant, to give them an incentive that you are not using your premises, please give your premises on rent, and we assure you when your this limited period tenancy will come to an end, the vacant possession of the premises will be given back to you. So this is an exception where limited period tenancy can be created by the landlord. Then this part 4. Part 4 of your syllabus, it deals with Slum Clearance Act. The Slum Clearance Act, again, it was enacted with the intention to protect the tenants from eviction, the tenants who are residing in the slum areas, and it was enacted with the intention to develop slum area. So if a property is situated in slum area, then entire power regarding that has been given to the competent authority, and unless or until permission is being given by the competent authority, no one can file eviction petition against the tenant. And even if landlord has got eviction order from any other court, if the landlord has got eviction order from rent controller under Delhi Rent Control Act, or if he has got eviction order from civil court, even then he will not be able to execute that order unless or until permission is being given by the competent authority under Slum Clearance Act. So some of the provisions of Slum Clearance Act we will discuss here under topic 4 with the help of cases which have been given here in your case material. And one very important aspect which also we will discuss here, that is what will happen if there is a conflict between Rent Control Act and Slum Clearance Act. Suppose a landlord files the eviction petition under Delhi Rent Control Act on the ground of bona fide requirement, but that property is situated in slum area. What will happen in that situation? Whether he is entitled to file eviction petition only on the after getting permission from rent controller, or he is required to take permission from competent authority. This is a very important and very complicated aspect which in detail I will discuss with the help of relevant cases here, that what will happen if there is a conflict between the two laws. There are various doctrines of interpretation which will be applied, and on that basis, ultimately the decision has been given by the Supreme Court in various cases which I will be discussing with you in my class. So this is in brief the overview regarding this particular subject, and I hope that I am able to make it clear that what kind of subject it is, what you are going to study under this particular subject, and what is the relevance of this particular subject. So if you are having any query or doubt, you can ask it.